the oldest known musical instrument on Earth, and it predates written history by tens of thousands of years. Flutes carved from bird bone and mammoth ivory have been found in caves in present-day Germany dating back roughly 40,000 years, making the flute the oldest confirmed instrument type humans have made. Every continent independently developed some version of it. A flute makes sound without any reed or vibrating membrane at all, just air split across an edge. That single mechanical idea produced the Western concert flute, the Japanese shakuhachi, the Indian bansuri, and the Andean quena, all built on the same basic physics. How many instruments get invented independently that many times across that many cultures? Modern Western concert flutes are typically metal, with a system of keys covering tone holes. Traditional flutes worldwide are usually wood, bamboo, or bone, often with simple open finger holes. Played by directing a stream of air across an edge, never into a reed. The flute holds a lead melodic role in orchestral music and an even more central role in folk traditions, from Irish music to Chinese and Japanese classical repertoire. Theobald Boehm redesigned the Western flute's key system in the 1830s, creating the fingering layout nearly every modern flute still uses.
Bagpipes, an instrument that never stops sounding once you start playing it, because the air supply never has to pause for breath. Bagpipes appeared across the ancient Mediterranean and Middle East well before the Common Era. They developed independently in many regions, but became most strongly associated with Scotland and Ireland from the medieval period onward. A bagpipe player breathes normally while the instrument keeps sounding continuously because the airbag stores pressure and feeds the reeds independently of the player's breathing. That's why bagpipe music has no pauses and no silence between notes. Can you think of another acoustic instrument built specifically to never stop sounding? An airbag, traditionally animal hide and now often synthetic, is inflated by mouth or bellows and squeezed under the arm. Reed pipes, called chanters, and drones, fed by that pressurized air, produce the melody and the continuous background tone. The Great Highland bagpipe became central to Scottish military and ceremonial music, while distinct traditions developed separately across Ireland, Spain, and the Balkans. Each uses a different chanter scale and drone arrangement, producing dramatically different sounds from the same mechanism. Trumpet. The simplest brass instrument possible, a tube and a player's lips, and for thousands of years that was the entire design. Natural trumpets without valves existed in ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia, used mainly for military signaling and ceremony rather than melody. For most of history, a trumpet could only play the notes naturally available in its harmonic series. For thousands of years, a trumpet player could only access notes that occur naturally as overtones of a single, fixed tube length, which is why ancient trumpet music is almost entirely fanfares rather than melody. The valve system that solved this didn't appear until the early 1800s. How long can an instrument exist before someone finally fixes its most obvious limitation? Modern trumpets use 3 piston valves that redirect air through extra tubing, instantly changing the instrument's effective length. The mouthpiece is a small metal cup the player's lips vibrate against. The body is brass, with a flared bell that projects sound outward. The trumpet carries lead, melodic, and signaling roles across jazz, classical music, and ceremonial contexts worldwide. Louis Armstrong and Miles Davis each redefined what it could express in jazz, decades apart and in almost opposite directions.
The only brass instrument that changes pitch by physically sliding part of itself
longer or shorter. The trombone developed in Europe in the 15th century from an earlier instrument called the slide trumpet, with the sliding mechanism moved to a dedicated U-shaped section. By the 16th century, its modern slide design had essentially stabilized. A trombonist changes pitch by physically extending a U-shaped slide outward, lengthening the tube, then pulling it back in to raise the pitch again. No valves, no keys. It's the only widely used brass instrument that achieves its full range through continuous movement rather than mechanical switches. Why do you think every other brass instrument moved to valves while the trombone never did? The slide consists of two parallel tubes that telescope into each other, requiring regular lubrication. Because pitch is continuously variable, trombonists can produce smooth glides between notes that valved instruments cannot replicate as easily. The trombone holds a foundational role in orchestral brass, jazz ensembles, and reggae horn lines, where its smooth pitch bends and warm, low register suit both harmony and solo work. Glenn Miller's big band arrangements gave it melodic space rarely offered before.
Oboe, the instrument every orchestra tunes to, and the reason comes down to a sound that's almost impossible to mistake for anything else. The oboe developed in France in the mid-1600s, evolving from an earlier double reed instrument called the shawm into a quieter design suited to indoor performance. Its name comes from the French hautbois, meaning loud wood, a reference to its noisy predecessor. Orchestras tune to the oboe's A because its narrow double reed produces an exceptionally stable, piercing pitch that cuts through every other instrument, making it easy for everyone to match. A single 18th century design choice still organizes how every orchestra begins every rehearsal. Have you ever wondered why that one note always comes first? The oboe uses a double reed, two thin pieces of cane bound together, rather than the single reed used by clarinets and saxophones. The narrow, conical wooden body produces a focused tone. Most professional oboists make or heavily adjust their own reeds, since reed quality shapes the sound directly. The oboe carries prominent melodic lines in orchestral and chamber music, valued for a tone that projects clearly without overwhelming the ensemble. Its penetrating quality also made it central to film scoring, often signaling melancholy or pastoral atmosphere. Clarinet, the woodwind with the widest range of any single instrument in its family, built almost by accident from an older folk instrument. The clarinet was developed in Germany around the start of the 1700s by Johann Christoph Denner, who added a register key to an earlier folk instrument called the chalumeau, extending its range and effectively creating a new instrument. A single clarinet can smoothly cover roughly 3.5 octaves, a wider continuous range than almost any other orchestral woodwind achieves without switching instruments. That range came from one mechanical addition, a key controlling a register hole that lets the same tube produce two completely different overtone series. Would you have guessed one small key could double an instrument's range? The body is typically wood, traditionally African blackwood, with a single reed bound to the mouthpiece using a ligature. A system of keys covers tone holes along the cylindrical body. The reed vibrates against the mouthpiece as air passes across it. The clarinet became central to classical writing, klezmer music, and early jazz, where its flexibility across registers suited both lyrical melody and rapid technical passages. Benny Goodman brought it into the spotlight as a lead jazz voice during the swing era, an instrument designed to bridge brass and woodwinds. and it succeeded so completely that most listeners can't say which family it belongs to. The saxophone was invented by Adolphe Sax, a Belgian instrument maker who patented the design in 1846. Sax wanted an instrument with the projection of brass combined with the tonal flexibility of woodwinds, intended originally for military bands. The saxophone is made of brass, but officially classified as a woodwind because it uses a single reed rather than a brass player's vibrating lips. Most people assume material determines classification, but the saxophone proves that what matters is how the sound is generated. Did you assume it was a brass instrument before reading this? The body is brass, shaped with a conical bore that widens from mouthpiece to bell. A single reed, similar to the clarinets, vibrates as air passes across it. The instrument comes in several sizes, with alto and tenor, most common in jazz and pop. The saxophone never gained a permanent place in the standard orchestra, but became one of the defining solo voices of jazz throughout the century. Charlie Parker and John Coltrane each pushed improvisation further